impressions of Halbrand have been quite consistent throughout the first season of The Rings of Power. The first is that there have been a lot of hints that could be interpreted as his being Sauron. Now, not everyone is on board with this theory, but it has gained more steam with every passing episode, with new little hints and clues being introduced that could easily be taken that way. Now, it's not like the show is intentionally pushing us to ask the question of, oh, is he Sauron? I guarantee you that 90 to 95% of viewers are not thinking about this at all. And that's not a slight on them, it's just a different mode that the show is operating in, as opposed to how it's operating in terms of The Stranger, wherein we're absolutely supposed to be wondering, who could that be? There are snippets of dialogue tying Halbrand to the philosophies and ideas that Sauron later espouses and utilizes, such as when Halbrand talks to Galadriel about the need to help someone master the object of their fear and concern in order for you to then master them. This is exactly how Sauron defeats the elves. He tricks them into forging the Rings of Power, but it's not like they're complete dopes, and it's not like he's this genius enchanter who can make them think whatever he wants. He looks at them, judges their concerns and fears, and then presents himself as the solution to those anxieties to give himself a position that he then abuses. There are also hints of his possibly being Sauron in the dialogues we get between him and Adar. Would we get these same conversations if Halbrand wasn't Sauron? I don't think so. The mix of resentment and familiarity makes a lot more sense in the context of these two being rivals, to be Morgoth's successor, as opposed to simply Halbrand being this noble, fair-hearted king of the Southlands who has returned to lead his people to righteousness and justice. The other impression that the show has cultivated about Halbrand is that he is similar to Aragorn. It certainly helps with that impression that Charlie Vickers, who plays Halbrand with a mix of roguish, dashing coolness and secretive, hidden resentment and uncertainty, looks quite similar to Viggo Mortensen as Aragorn. They both have a complexion that's more rugged than classically beautiful, and yet they act with a sage wisdom that is not immediately clear to those around them, but does speak to a certain extent to their ability to see beyond mere illusions and external noise and see into the real nature of things. They don't know all the answers, but they have an almost preternatural sense of who people are and what the situations they face are that is far beyond the lacking and incomplete awareness of most of these characters in both Lord of the Rings and The Rings of Power, who are so consumed by their own petty grievances that they fail to see the larger, more sociological and philosophical portrait of the world outside what they're immediately trying to achieve. Most obviously and externally, they're kings without kingdoms, and they approach their lost title with a sense of uncertainty and unease. They are not overtly full of hubris. They have a lot of doubt and uncertainty about themselves, and they're encouraged to reclaim their kingly positions less by this internal fire for prestige and fame than by the urgings of those around them, and by an internal sense of their own duty and responsibility to their people and to the world. And yet they still hesitate. Others present them as healers of a fractured world, but they don't necessarily think of themselves in that regard. It's also worth noting that Halbrand is significantly more like movie Aragorn than he is like book Aragorn. The two are significantly different characters, as I discussed in a past video about Aragorn. In both cases, he is a fair-minded and selfless, forgotten king who needs to return to his throne to create a sense of wholeness and a sense of unity amidst all the fractured decay and blight of Middle-earth. But in the movies, he is significantly more reluctant. He is significantly more of a conflicted, almost romanticist hero than the embodiment of obvious purity and light that he is more in the books. So, why? It's a lot to do, I think, with audience awareness. The show provides hints that Halbrand might be Sauron, but these could easily be missed by someone who's not really familiar with the show, or the books, or Tolkien's universe as a whole. However, the parallels between movie Aragorn, the conception of the character that most people probably know, even if they haven't read the books, even if they're not big fans of the universe, and Halbrand are obvious. Rings of Power wants people to think that Halbrand is Aragorn-ish. He's not exactly like Aragorn, and he's definitely a bit more mischievous and playful, and he makes a few more bad decisions, but the parallels are there, and yet there's something off about him as well. Even if you don't think he's Sauron, he's not quite a figure that we can fully trust, even when he's willing to be more open with Galadriel, even when we have these beautiful, haunting moments of the two of them together. He's holding something back just like Aragorn, but there's more to the story. The show is intentionally presenting him in this light to draw out the parallels to Aragorn, but also make us question those parallels. So what, in fact, is the effect of this? Why would you make a character that has extensive similarities to both Sauron, the ultimate evil of the Lord of the Rings, and Aragorn, one of the most heroic characters of the Lord of the Rings? Obviously, the show is not saying that Sauron and Aragorn are the same morally or otherwise, but it is saying that one can easily be mistaken for the other. The show is very much making a point about the dangers of acting on fractured and partial information. Acting on perceptions and judgments created by these narrow pieces of information can work out well, or it can work out poorly. We don't know for sure. The show is warning us not to be too certain, to not be rash and not be overly gung-ho about a certain feeling or judgment that we have, because we can always be wrong, because our perceptions are limited by our experiences, by our worldviews, by the mores and values that shaped us. We're stuck in our place in time and space. and our perspective necessarily reflects these limitations. There is nothing wrong with this. To be human is to err, a saying that likely was very close to Tolkien's heart and was certainly very close to his work. But it does mean that we should not believe ourselves to be above mistaken and often foolish judgments. The characters Tolkien critiques most heavily are the characters who are reckless, who do have this supreme overconfidence in their own rational decision-making and intellect. They believe that they can elevate themselves above the status of merely being a person with a limited point of view who can do their best to fight for justice and morality, but who cannot know everything. Think of Boromir in The Lord of the Rings. Think of the elves who allow themselves to be tricked by Sauron, eventually in the Second Age, when he offers to create them these rings. They're so concerned with their immediate caprices that they do not sense the danger around them. And this could have been avoided if they were less sure of themselves, if they were less supremely confident in the righteousness of their judgments. Say what you will about the 19th century medievalist tradition from which Tolkien draws, but it is properly skeptical about pure reason, about the ability for someone based on these abstract Enlightenment principles to arrive at a fully complete image of what the world is and what one should do. Our decisions are innately based on fractured information and incomplete sources, and we should be humble because of that. Tolkien gets this from a long line of thinkers going all the way back to Boethus, the Consolation of Philosophy, going back to Chaucer and the Knight's Tale, where there is this long, haunting, elegant description about how we don't really know what will make us happy. We don't really know what actions and what events will end up satisfying us. And so we venture to judge the world for being, to our mind, so absurd and ridiculous, and yet we never acknowledge that our perceptions are so flawed that even if the world was to our liking, we would still find ourselves in misery. Think also of The Fairy Queen, which Tolkien knew very well, that great English epic by Edmund Spenser. Tolkien's friend C.S. Lewis, the author of the Narnia books, was a world-renowned scholar on the Fairy Queen. And this is a poem constantly about mistaken perceptions, of poor judgments made based on incomplete information. The world of the Fairy Queen is one laden with meaning, and yet its meaning we consistently misinterpret. And Tolkien's world is very similar. Even Frodo, that humble, sweet-hearted avatar of justice and goodness, overestimates his own ability to throw the ring into Mordor by the end. We can be wrong when we're acting based on partial and fragmented clues. Sometimes when we see this noble king who has been displaced, and we go rush to help him assume the throne again, he could be an Aragorn. But other times he could be a Halbrand. He could be a Sauron, perhaps, and it's not always easy to know the difference. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching The Rings of Power. This show is consistently excellent. Every episode has been seamlessly and organically building off the ideas of the last one. Can't wait to see what they do next. Anyway, tune in soon for next analysis. We'll be coming soon. Promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.